Bajadi Gamarua Gadigal Eora. Good day and welcome to Gadigal and Eora country, where these podcasts are being made. I'm Uncle Michael from Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, and we're the custodians of land, air, water and culture within our boundaries. Our elders and members would like to welcome everyone here to these podcasts, and we'd like to acknowledge that it is on the land of the Gadigal, and we'd like to also acknowledge all the different countries, clans, tribes and nations around New South Wales and around Australia, but we'd also like to further acknowledge those other countries from around the world and the First Nations people from around the world who also understand the connection to country and how important it is to look after Mother Earth and to the spirituality and culture that's in there. As we say here in Sydney, it came out of Redfern, always was, always will be Aboriginal land, never ceded. I'd like to say that what a traditional bark canoe in Sydney is called. It's important that people learn this information. It's called a Nawi. Imagine paddling out on that beautiful harbour, starting at Circular Quay, paddling out and you look on your right. You see the beautiful Opera House. But traditionally there would be an island and there would be middens there. Middens are shells, a collection of shells where people would come together to eat, but it's also about sustainability and keeping count of the resources that you're using. Those shells were taken and they were used in the first buildings in Sydney here. If you go down to the rocks, look along Argyle Street and other older buildings down there, you will see in the mortar little shells, and they're taken from where the Opera House is today, Bennelong Point, but traditionally that place is called Jubbagali. Also in other buildings, like in the Mint, if you go there and some of the older buildings in Macquarie Street, you will see the little specks of shell.
Welcome to Busting Buzzwords, the podcast where we tackle those words that mean so much to our work, yet so little, in the aim to what? Bust them! We're your hosts, Clara
and Ben.
And today we have Matt Jaws with us. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Before we get into what we are going to bust, who are we busting with, Matt?
Yeah, I'm a lecturer in Japanese studies at the University of Sydney, and I've been here since 2019, August. So coming up on 4 years.
4-year anniversary.
Yeah.
What is that in academic terms? What is it, paper, cardboard? What is it? I don't know.
It's probably lead.
It's lead.
Whatever they can sink you to the bottom of the ocean with.
Thanks for joining us, Matt. Can you tell us about the buzzword we're going to bust together today?
Yeah, I've selected output.
Okay, output. Big word, big meanings, and we'll see if we can bust them together or not. So the whole premise of this podcast is whether or not we can bring a bit of clarity, or I don't know what's the opposite, unclarity, vagueness. Mm-hmm. If we can actually clarify or put a bit more of like a sense of confusion around these terms that our guests are going to bust with us.
But you know what they say?
What? What do they say?
It's not the result that matters, it's the journey.
No, I think they do say the results matter, I think. As a research
Outputs are part of that, yeah.
Outputs. I think the results kind of matter as a reason. Anyway, we're going to bust. What are we busting?
We are busting output. So could you tell us what output means to you, Matt?
Yeah, I've thought about it. It's been on my mind since arriving in 2019. After being onboarded by the chair of our discipline, a few months down the line, I have a review, the annual month. Well, it was every 6 months, and then it was annual. And so you're asked all of these things. How are you doing?
The glorious
teaching?
APD, I take it.
Yes, yes.
Annual performance review.
Right. And so you go through all of those, teaching, your leadership, your research. And you hear words come up. What kind of outputs? And for us, that's often things like, producing a podcast could be an output, publishing things. And so I was constantly haunted by this word output. I had a couple of fixed-term positions before coming here. Nobody really spoke about outputs.
And it was one of them was, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think one of them was in Japan, right?
Yeah, I finished my Ph.D. in America, but I was in Japan. So I wasn't really concerned with outputs then, but then I went to the UK for my first position and then to the United States. And
where was that? Which university?
Cambridge in England, and then University of Colorado Boulder.
Right. So a couple of few places where output, I guess it could be, research-intense universities, I guess. So output is, I guess, a term that's floated here and there.
But I didn't really hear it, though. It was all about publications. It was about, well, you did hear people talk about getting things out, but not this
Putting
wrapped up in one word, output. That I really started being haunted by that when I arrived at the University of Sydney.
Haunted, like spectral.
Yeah. I don't have a great feeling about this word, although...
What feelings do you have for... sorry, Clara. What feelings do you have?
Fear.
But
trepidation.
Why fear? It's interesting because you mentioned fear and you mentioned trepidation, and to me, trepidation is a bit of a fake friend because in French, trépidation is something that's positive.
Say that again. What is it?
Trépidation.
Wow.
And it's something that's positive, but it seems very negative, and I'm quite curious as to why are you scared of output? What is scary about that word?
Well, it's something that we don't have to start with, and we're told that we need to have it.
Sorry, but what do you mean we don't have it?
Well, we don't have outputs to begin with. And by outputs, I'm specifically referring to publications.
Right.
Whether it's, peer-reviewed journal articles, books, chapters.
The quote-unquote gold standard.
The gold standard, yeah.
Which I had never really heard. I had heard about it. But again, the idea of standard output, golden, all of these things.
And before I had one of these outputs, I'd heard people talking about them. You're going to need to publish as a postgrad student, and if not then, once you get your job and you're at a university, it's something that's going to be expected. And so, I understood that this was something I'd have to do, but there was... I guess I had kind of this thing to look forward to, like, wow, I'm going to have my name on something. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to research. I'm going to have something out there. Mm-hmm. That out there sounded so romantic and like such a challenge. But output, it's like almost like a bowel movement, like you drop it it's sitting there. We'll take a look.
It has been put out.
It has been.
I mean, it sounds like very unglamorous, I think.
I think it's an unglamorous buzzword that we hear on a daily basis.
Which I'm just... to ask you about this. Mm-hmm. So again, our mission here. Mission, do we call it mission?
Yeah, it's a quest. It's a mission.
It's a quest.
It's a quest. Like the Holy Grail, the Holy Buzzwords.
On a lesser scale. Maybe not the Holy Grail, maybe something. Like we are really interested. Maybe we should also talk to people about why we're doing this, Clara. So why is it that we want to bust words like, output?
It's to bring meaning to what we do, I think. Because a lot of the times it feels like these words have been... I'm not going to say taken from us, but a lot of those words, it's like when you say a word over and over and over again, it loses its meaning. Right. Like if I were to say output 25 times in a row, it would completely lose its meaning. And so I think because all these buzzwords have been said over and over and over again in the last few years, they've lost meaning to me, but meaning in the semantic sense, but also in the more metaphysical sense. Like, well, what is the meaning of those words? And I thought...
The big why, you mean?
Yes, and also how
why
can
do we output? How do we output?
No, but it's more like how are we going to reappropriate these words? Like how are we going to reclaim these words and bring them a meaning that is more personal to us? As academics.
But I think during COVID particularly, I think people we talked a lot about, so people had different priorities.
Yeah.
So the lockdown meant that people could focus on different kinds of output. Like I personally worked a lot with podcasts and hence this thing where I saw that there's a lot in this different space where you can take words, ideas and translate them, reformulate them, put them in another medium. And so as Matt, just to go back to Matt here, this is this idea of questioning the status quo, basically. Yeah. So is it only the one thing you always have to do? And with output being I remember coming here a couple of years ago and being, so output is this sense of this unit of measurement, almost like a recipe, like you bake a cake and you pour 3 somethings of output in it and, to succeed. And I was like, is it that clearly measurable? Is it that clear?
But I think to me, I'm a word nerd.
What does it say again?
A word nerd.
A word nerd.
So from a word nerd perspective, why use
Wordologist.
Yeah, I wouldn't say wordologist because that sounds
Wordy.
that sounds like I've got it sounds like a medical profession that I don't really want to go see.
I'm a doctor.
But from a word nerd perspective, I wonder, why is it that we use output and not publication when clearly output means publication? And then this differentiation that is not happening then leads to non-traditional research outputs, which to me is even more mind-boggling that, we can call it an output, right? So what do you make of this distinction, Matt? Like, NTROs, output, publication. How do you navigate that?
I think it comes down to language and who gets to decide what we call things in our community here at the university, universities in general. And I think that certain status quos are, developed. And I haven't looked into the etymology or the evolution of this word at university, but it really strikes me as the language of production, the language of business, of putting something out there to show that this is where your money is going. This is what we have to show. It is detached from any kind of personal meaning. What I said earlier about putting something of your own out there, it kind of feels like a satellite that's going to beam messages or maybe attracts somebody just because it's out there floating in the sky and you can catch it at night. But output, it's detached, and I think it's intentionally detached because it's part of this bigger, I guess, scheme of production and perhaps profit.
So for you then, again, would it be more that, would it be fair to say that output and you work as a researcher, does that have in you? That's what we're here for, to bust. And it is, again, we might just give people a bit of an idea because we thought these things are very kind of bloated, big words, just like a big, zeppelin, like a big aircraft, a blimp hovering around and almost sometimes like a cloud, hard to make out the contours and specifically point to things and say, so this is what I mean by that. And I think one of the things we do not enough is talk about, particularly I think what Matt was just pointing to, the emotional connection. So you can, as you just were saying, that there could be your intellectual offspring. You could have, I guess, a sense of pride, a sense of, ownership. You live on in these things. Or it could be, as you were just saying, more like, maybe you can talk a bit more about that. You're like almost on a big code, like, like an assembly line thing where you just produce and it's very almost mechanical in nature.
Yeah. Well, just that you mentioned the chill, and I like how you speak of publications in terms with a word like offspring, because we do spend a lot of time thinking about these. They become very personal, although we often need to remain objective. I have a website, and to direct people to my publications, I have a little line on there, and it says. It's not a great word because it's so cold. Outputs. So I attack the word outputs on it's the landing page, and
that's your personal website.
My personal website.
How draw us a picture, Matt? How does your personal? What does it look like? Because again, we've got our academic website. So I think right now there's a competition at this point in time for spruiking up your academic profile, which goes hand in hand,
right? Yeah.
With this idea of just looking. Clara's giving me side eye for saying that. Maybe I should.
No. If I think one way of thinking about my personal website is it's a stance, not necessarily against the academic profile we have online, because I have a lot of the same information on there, but I don't feel like that's a representation of who I am. Even during business hours, 9 to 5, when I'm sitting behind my desk or in the library or working with students, it just doesn't really feel like me. And I guess there's this desire to be myself more as an academic. And oftentimes I feel like I'm performing a role. I'm presenting a front in order to satisfy people to tick off these boxes to get to the next point, to get to that next promotion or to earn that big grant. So I really don't feel that I have the opportunity. So that's what the personal website is all about. I can start it off with a headline that says, "Oh, good, you're here," and that's how it begins. And then if you click I said, go on, click it to go to my profile, and the top says good day. And then if you
just go on, click me, or what is
it? It says, if you'd like to see a cold list of my hot outputs, go on.
That's what it's
click it real good.
Oh my!
Is what I write, and then you click on it, and then the heading for that. I don't even think I use the headline outputs. I think I just start with get into books, because I've already made the jab at the word output. It's like click it real good. That's what is that a reference to? It's the Salt and Pepper song, right?
Yeah. So in a way, this personal webpage is a way for you to reclaim the academic profile and find something that it's a way to reconcile your identity as an academic with your identity as Matt, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Would you say so?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do take a jab at the word outputs, and I do, I think it's important to, it's not like I'm standing up and protesting, and because like I said, a lot of what is on my personal website is on the academic profile. But for some reason, I guess it's just not me. I want to kind of break from that language, and that might have to be with me as who I am as a person, maybe my background, I don't know.
Do you have that feeling?
I think
with your academic profile?
Right. So I think there's an interesting discussion there, which, as Matt was talking about, his personal. I do not have a personal website.
Neither do I.
Maintaining all that stuff it's another labor of love, as you were saying. So I think you need to have this. Again, if we can go back to that, would be quite interesting. What kind of emotional connection do you have to the standard template website? The boilerplate kind of things that an academic profile kind of enforces. And the other thing was more about, sorry, and this may be going off in a different direction here, but so output, again, would be to me something where it can be very functional, because, it's a very diverse culture here on campus, colleagues from all over the world, different languages, communities, cultures, traditions, whatnot. And so how can you all basically speak that same language of, what is an output? What does it mean to you? And different people, I guess, bring very different things to that. So again, one of the points of this podcast is to maybe, we said it's busting, but maybe it's also, I don't know, Clara, what do you think? Shaping, contouring, making it more precise? What?
It's, again, making it more precise maybe, but I don't think we have the pretension of redefining all those words. I think we really do enjoy these conversations, and I think both you and I love chatting about those things and love chatting to colleagues about those things, because it's through these conversations that we can gain more understanding.
And I think busting might be, in that sense, it might be kind of almost deflating, taking this hot air out. As Matt, you were just saying about, that can be very functional. So you have to use them for promotion or for an application or for grants, that's just how it is. But then I guess my question would be, so which of your quote-unquote outputs, so if you were to use another word instead of output, what other word would you be using to describe? So and because I personally know your book that you just published on Japanese, as you say, sit-down comedy there. What would you describe it as, an output, or is it more, because I know there's years of work going into that. Is it it is a labor of love, really.
Yeah.
And you've been raising it like a child, almost. So.
Yeah, I don't want to backtrack too much, but what you said there about outputs, because we all have different things that we produce. What do people in the music conservatory do? Are they required to, say, put out a certain number of CDs over a certain amount of time? Are they production, right? So we all produce different things. Some of us are producing podcasts like this. If for what I do, I'd like to. There's a lot of pride in saying I have a book. Even monograph is a bit stuffy, although that's what it is.
And just for everybody who's listening, because some people might not know exactly. So can you define a monograph, just so we have,
Yeah, it's a book. It's an academic book that focuses on a very specialized topic. It's very niche, and it's something that nobody else has really looked at. So it's new and original, and it's highly academic. So not for the general reader, but for other academics or highly intellectual people who may have an interest in that. say how long that took to define. And maybe that's, I hate to speak against what, I guess, my negativity towards the word output, but maybe that's one reason that we have the word output is because it allows us to wrap up so many notions of production.
Like a shorthand for.
Yeah.
But isn't it so reductive, though? The word output, if you think about a monograph, if you think about even a co-authored book, an edited book, like any type of publication that we have, the word output, to me, seems awfully reducting.
Which, interestingly enough, if I just had an interview with somebody from the age, and then people never ask, if it's a journal or something, they never talk to you about your outputs. They only, what are you working on?
Yeah.
What is it like? I think that's the other thing that always fascinates me about this idea of output is that it's such almost a cold, hard term. And I think like what we do a lot, with engagement, and another big word that we might bust later in this series is warming up these cold terms, warming up, the institution, warming up knowledge. And it's kind of this labor of communicating, what are you working on? Be passionate about it. And then it's almost in contradiction to this idea of, then put it on a page for a grant and be super descriptive about it. So do you, also Clara, both of you might be interesting for me personally really to hear, do you sometimes feel like that it's almost like working in two personas, and there's almost like a split personality where the output and all is so mechanical, and then there's like what you're passionate, what drives you, but it might not be that kind of output that, I guess, gets you to a specific functional place here. So like, do you have any feelings about that or reactions?
Yeah, I definitely I feel as though I have a split personality. Well, of course, our work in our life at home, our work after 5, if that's when we finish. A lot of us have, flex hours too. And but yeah, I guess I've been conflicted ever since I came into academia because I don't come from an academic background. So I have that personal conflict that, okay, this isn't me, but this is the job. This is what I'm expected to do. So, okay, but I've always asked myself, is there anything I could be doing to make this more about not me, as I don't need it to be about me, but I want, if I could enjoy it more and have it be something that I am generally invested in, something that I really think has profound meaning, even better. And maybe that's one reason I went into, I was told, although I was interested in theater and I wanted to pursue a Ph.D. in theater, I was coached, I was advised, don't get a Ph.D. in theater because in our field, Japanese studies, the gold standard, to use that term again, is literature. Get the literature degree because literature applies to everything else. You get your language, it's also connected to theater. So get your literature, and then you can do theater. It can be something that you do,
like a fun thing.
Yeah,
the one thing where almost you kind of splice it off, and it becomes the thing that makes it worth.
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
process.
So that's, I guess, that's why I went into Japanese sit-down comedy for one, and theater in general. Although my degree's in literature, because I listened, and I think it did help me. Maybe if I didn't get that literature PhD, maybe I wouldn't have been so lucky right before COVID, because I know a lot of people didn't fare so well, before and during the pandemic with jobs and whatnot. So I feel very lucky in that regard.
Again, we're trying to keep this very short, very brief. So for the people listening, it's not yet another thing to have to do because we're quite aware that people have not that much time on their hands. But going back to this point, Clara, I think you had made before about outputs and like, what is an output to you then?
It's interesting that you're asking me this question because in front of me, I've got this sound device with 5 different ports, and all of them say output. And the more I stare at them, the less
fun.
the less I know what output is.
Good find.
But I do think that Matt raises a very important point about performance and the split that we often feel as academics. You have to put your researcher hat on, and then you have to put your administrator hat on, and then you have to put your teacher hat on. Like there's so many different hats, and how do you reconcile all of those hats? And how do you maintain your identity as a person on top of that is a crucial question. Not necessarily linked to outputs, but I think what I'm trying to get to here is this idea that I think a lot of us academics right now are becoming a lot more strategic about what quote unquote outputs we decide to spend our time on, because there is this important need to find funding for our research, and it's the never-ending question of, do I pursue the output that I'm passionate about, or do I pursue the output that is going to help me get a more solid track record to get that sought after grant?
We're also coached and told what to do, how to strategize, right?
Exactly. So where do you go from there? And for some of us who are very lucky, these two visions align, but I think for a majority of us, they don't. And so we have to make the choice in terms of outputs. What is the output that's going to solidify my track record, even if it means taking away a little bit of the passion that I have for my work? So that's a bit too deep, and
no, this is exactly what we're saying.
But that's my view on outputs at the moment. But I think what's beautiful about these buzzwords is that your understanding of this buzzword will change depending on where you are in your career, what's your next goal, what meeting you just came out of. There's all these different things that can shape our understanding of those buzzwords. And I think that's why these conversations are so important to us, is what is going to make it a bit more clear.
Right. Hopefully this kind of helps, these conversations, and again, this is where we would encourage people listening, if you'd like, drop us a line, react to these conversations, get in touch with other people in your faculties, in your schools, wherever you are located. This is not just for research. This will be, buzzwords around teaching, around admin, around service, whatever it is. This is for everybody in the community here, and everybody has an opinion, everybody has a take, so that really is that. Matt, before we let you go though, last question would be for you. Have we busted? This is this grandiose question that we came up with. Did we bust it, or maybe did we not bust it?
Is it busted or dusted?
Busted or dusted, yeah.
I don't think it's dusted. I think it's busted, though. I think we've put a good crack in it. And interestingly enough, I also am feeling a little better about the term because it's something that, if we discuss it, if we look up and look around, look at our colleagues in the eyes and talk about these things, we realize that these are things that we own, ultimately.
I mean, again, you would not necessarily maybe wake up one day with a neck tattoo that says output. So, it might not be that kind of
Right.
You might. It might be, output, and the other side. What does it say on the other side of your neck then? If it says output?
Input.
Input.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the
Yeah.
time to talk to us about it. And for those of you listening, just connect with us at Busting Buzzwords on Twitter and let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, come along at the next busting.
The busting session.
The next busting session, yeah.
We've got exciting topics
More to come.
planned for you this season.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
That's it. Bust over.